Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to our, I guess our first official LAMP board meeting since the last time we were just kind of getting started. I guess I'll call to order officially for the recording here, 1:30. I'm a big believer in starting on time and hopefully ending in a reasonable manner, not taking up too much of our time. So Ryan, do we do like a roll call to see who's here? Do we need to record that or?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and record who is here. Looks like everybody's here except for the one vacancy in District 4 and also Wayne Flowers.
Okay.
What is the status of the vacancy?
I just checked with Melissa in admin, and she said she's talked with Commissioner Blocker, and he has somebody in mind, but has not confirmed the vacancy yet.
Now, he just can appoint that person, doesn't require any other board action, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, I didn't know.
Okay, so we got the roll call finished. Next on the agenda item is general public comment for items not on the agenda. So I guess, Ryan, I thought we were going to do that at the end of the meeting, but I guess here we're going to do it right at the beginning.
For anything not on the current agenda, if
Okay.
anybody wants to speak.
Okay, because we had a Mr. Steve Davies put in a request for speaking, and he's also provided a narrative. Thank you for doing that. We love maps. Really good, really good. So I handed out, everybody should have one, and there's a map on the back. I think that's what he's going to be talking about. So I guess, Mr. Davies, at this time, if you want to go ahead and take the podium and present your information.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, my name is Steve Davies, and I'm here as a private resident who has concerns about conservation of pristine natural lands in St. Johns County, which are sadly diminishing with every passing week. I commend the county commissioners, the staff, and this advisory board of the LAMP for taking the bold steps to reconstitute, and wish you much success to carry forward what's been accomplished in the past with putting lands into conservation. Specifically, my wife and I, we live in the southern part of the county around the Moultrie Creek area. And there's one LAMP-inspired park close to us already, that's Vail Point Park, and there's other open space that we take advantage of. That's the Shore Drive Waterfront Park, which we, as I say, enjoy immensely. We appreciate how these little gems are tucked in among the residential housing and natural features, and they exist in harmony. I'm recommending to this board for acquisition consideration parcels of land that are upriver from these existing parks. That is waterfront property along Moultrie Creek, running west of the US 1 South Bridge that passes over the creek. There's many reasons for placing this land into protective conservation consistent with the criteria that's been published to date so far for the board. And I'd just like to touch on those briefly, as well as the chairman has said, my handout has a map on the backside highlighting the areas. But from an environmental standpoint, these lands would preserve tidal water areas that govern the health of the Moultrie Creek. They also provide protection providing protection to the headwaters of the creek could eventually tie into the central corridor area that has been identified as a focus area for the lands. As far as recreational, this area ensures availability of a healthy water resource that can be used for fishing, boating, and other nature watching by the general public. From an educational standpoint, the county parks and recs runs numerous boat and kayak trips up the creek there, and by conserving the area, it maintains a natural classroom that can be used for years to come. As far as infrastructure criteria, the creek already provides access from public park area, so there'd be no need for additional roads or maintaining of the roads or pathways going forward. And finally, as a bonus category, as I say, it would leverage off of existing parks in the area of the Moultrie Creek, as well as there's many of the lands close to the waterfront that are part of planned communities, HOAs, where the land is basically conserved already. So by patching together these elements, you increase the leverage of the environmental protection.
Through the chair, we have reached 3 minutes for the public comment. So you can extend that if you.
Where are you on number 4?
I went to number 4.
He was,
I've
Okay,
completed.
okay, go ahead, finish up, continue.
So just included in the map on the back side just gives you a pictorial of the areas westward of the US 1 route, or US 1 bridge, following the creek up quite a ways into its headwaters. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of residential area coming up close or at the banks, but by maintaining a buffer area between those houses and the waterway could help ensure the preservation of the general health of the creek.
Okay, okay, very good.
can I
very
ask a
good.
question?
Pardon me?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you're talking about primarily looking at individual undeveloped lots?
I'd say it looks
Yeah,
like
mostly.
90% of the area.
Yeah, that's, yeah, because I mean,
It's
at
all
this,
platted.
at this scale, it's all platted.
Yeah.
But that's okay, I mean, that's what you're, so if there are some individual lots, those are the ones you would like us to
Right,
target?
there's some in there that are 20 or 30 acres supposedly, or.
Yeah, there's a couple that look like they're fairly large, okay.
If you look on the maps, 2 of the maps we got last time, conservation areas, both of them conservation areas, it looks like a lot of them are identified, and one of them is already under water management district or somebody's control, the Larson tract is along that piece.
Shorty, can you show us which map you're looking at?
I'm looking at the
Okay.
first one that just says conservation
Okay.
areas. Okay, and it's really tiny and my eyes are really bad. But I can see it says Larson Tract. I'm fairly familiar with this because all these houses at the very side right here was a grant that I wrote that was not houses back when I wrote the grant. So I'm real familiar, unfortunately, with the development over there. And then on the one that says conservation areas and Florida Forever projects in St. Johns County, am I right, Ryan? That appears to be a big
Oh, he's
chunk
got
of
it on
that
it.
stuff.
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
have it
he's-
up
he's
here.
got it on the
If
screen.
you guys want me to, I can zoom in. You're talking about, I've got several of these open here. This one with
That one
the
there.
Board of Trustees?
Yeah, it would appear that there's a bunch of them along the loop there of Moultrie that are identified for acquisition already. Yeah.
Okay, along this area.
Can you zoom a little more? Yes,
Sure.
Yeah, see all those that are outlined in red right there. I don't know what their status is.
This is where you're talking?
Yeah, huh?
Yes.
Well, he was primarily talking,
Lower than that?
yeah, lower,
Over
from
that?
like,
Mhm.
the bend is what he was specifically talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just so you know, the headwaters of Moultrie Creek is 12-mile swamp,
Yeah,
believe it or not, which is
way up.
Way further
way up.
north.
Way up, yeah.
So.
But along
Okay.
that bend there, to 207, there's already a bunch of them, which is great.
I think those are a Blue Way. Isn't that the
It's
Florida?
identified on the Blue Way
Yeah.
map, yes.
Yeah, okay.
But so, well, I guess what I'm saying, ultimately get more points for adjacent properties and there's stuff already under public ownership. But I was gonna ask Ryan, what's the status on those with the red outlines? Are they identified as a Florida Forever or are they already acquired or?
Yeah, those are identified as a potential
Cool.
acquisition by the state.
So they're an existing Florida Forever project.
Correct, yeah.
But not in public ownership yet?
Correct.
Right.
And then there's one in there that was on the other map, the Larson Tract, that looks just south of there, that appears, yeah, right there, that appears to already be under public management.
It looks like it's crosshatched.
I looked through the links that we had sent out, and in there, I think that's the one that they had marked for as like a medium to low priority for the state. So
Okay.
it's at least on their radar. It was like number 3 on one of the lists.
Well,
Can't
yeah, it's
remember
also,
which.
I mean, we can help bump that up too.
It's crosshatched, so it's a regulatory conservation easement of some sort.
Yeah, the Larson Tract,
So it's
yeah.
protected.
Well,
So,
to
Mr.
some
Davis,
degree.
can you see these?
Yes, that's, yes.
That's what we're talking about, this area right in here.
Yeah, and that is a map that you can move around as you touch it.
You
so-
can, yeah,
Okay.
you can move it, Mike. It's kind of
Okay.
scary.
I know. I need a longer pointer next time.
Yeah.
Good hands, make it-
And if you're familiar with Florida Forever, just so you know, when a project is already on Florida Forever, it doesn't really matter how it's ranked. That would be a resiliency project under Florida Forever. And that just means that there are state dollars available. It may not be high on their list, but if the county or North Florida, whoever, were to identify that and bring it with money to the trustees, there's
match
all,
with.
yeah, and it could even be a tiny match. It could be $500,000 and the state might put in 2 or 3 or 4 million. That's the beauty of it.
Well,
So we will be looking at all those, I can assure you, those Florida Blue Waste projects.
They're looking at approving a lot of resiliency dollars in the budget this year too. That's one of the high priorities.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yeah, just one comment. I think it's great. I mean, this is a perfect example of the public coming out and having an idea and proposing it. I hope that that's the type of board we have where the public's like saying, hey, this is a good idea, and bringing these opportunities to the board. So I think that's awesome. I mean, right out the gate, we haven't really even organized the criteria yet. And I guess I just had one question regarding that. You had mentioned Central Corridor and Lamp Focus Area as something you've, I guess, already identified. Is that from something you've received?
I was on this map here at the last board meeting. We had talked somewhat about this Central Corridor area.
Understood, okay. So I guess that would be the question is this map something that we haven't formed anything yet, so to speak. So, I don't want to get the cart before the horse. We got to kind of come up with that criteria, that mapping system, so we can identify opportunities. But as he's already jumped on, he's using that map already. I mean, we haven't even really done anything with
Well-
it, but it's a great tool that someone can now use and say, hey, according to your map, according to your data, this looks like a good fit. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I would like to echo what he's saying for the public, that, this is a county club and board here, so, you're part of it, and we very much welcome your input. And tell your neighbors and friends to, come to one of our meetings and give similar comments. I will also add, Travis, from what you were saying, and Ryan, correct me here, but I mean, he sent us a bunch of links with maps and different
Yeah.
things like that. That's already for public consumption. And we're gonna fine tune it with our efforts in the next X amount of years or time or whatever that is. So it could be changing a little bit, but there is some data out there already that, we've shared with you all that were here last time. But again, for those of you that hadn't seen it, this is all available on the county's website. So, they say that data is power. So try to look at some of those things and see kind of where our baseline is right now. Yep. Everybody good? Okay. All right. If you'll notice the second piece of paper or handout behind our agenda, I guess you or Jan did a good job pulling some minutes together for us, huh? Yep,
From the
yep,
last meeting?
yep.
Yeah.
There's not any other public comment, I guess.
Yeah.
Sharon.
Yeah,
I didn't get anything, yeah,
we might, and
We
just
didn't have
ask,
any other speaker cards or anything.
okay,
Just double check.
okay. Thanks for reminding me, yeah.
Just a note of the minutes, I don't see anything about the public comment.
Well, that's what you-
In the front view. We're not, those public is erased from the minutes of the public. Raising the first minute.
Well, I didn't take the minutes, but,
I suggest we include public comment on the minutes in the future.
okay, we can do that,
Thank you.
yep. So you need a signature on the,
Yeah, basically your verbal approval and a signature on there.
Okay.
Are there any changes or additions?
Any
Yeah, you could amend it.
changes or additions?
Yeah, is that-
other than putting a comment on there about we did have public comments, and you will easily take care of that.
Is that something we vote on, is the approval of the minutes?
Yep.
normally.
Okay.
Okay, well, the minutes
I
with.
would like to approve the minutes as amended.
Okay.
Make a motion
Okay,
to approve. them.
do I have a second?
I second that.
Okay, is there any further discussion, ladies and gentlemen?
I'd like to just make a comment on the minutes. I'd echo what, I think it's Mr. Slavin, is
Yeah.
it? I'd echo what he said. I mean, in fact, when I was reviewing the minutes before this meeting, that very comment struck me, and I was intending to bring it up. And minutes are a funny thing in the sense that, what is the purpose of minutes? What's the value they add to an organization? And I kind of wanted to just kind of Google it really and say, why do we record minutes? Where is it from? And there's a lot of different opinions on minutes, but I guess I wanted to make the point that, minutes can be a tool for us as far as like organizational learning. What did we decide? And we don't have, at least in the first draft of this minutes, it's very basic, that makes a lot of sense, this was our first meeting. But going forward, should the minutes be a bit more detailed than they were? Should the why be captured in minutes? And I say that because, as Ed pointed out in the last meeting, these meetings aren't recorded. They're not televised. We don't have anything recorded here, so if our record...
They are
It is
recorded.
Oh, perfect. Well, I didn't know that. So what I was going to say is if our record is only the minutes, then you almost want to kind of lean towards a more detailed minutes, but since we do have it recorded here, that I think that comments, and that's made available to the public, I would assume. So I think that's great.
The other thing is, I brought up the question last time, was that we don't have an official secretary taking minutes. So Ryan does the best that he can, or Jan, or whoever county staff is in here. And, I think they're doing a fine job, and certainly we have the recordings to fall back on if we need to. So I have a signature on the minutes here, and I did do an addition for public comment. I'll just
Okay.
slide that over to you.
And you have a second, so now we need to do a voice vote.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so be it, Ryan.
Okay.
I gotta say, you guys are coaching me through Robert's rules pretty good. I appreciate that.
There's this
We will all
whole
stumble
section.
through it.
Yeah,
There's this
we're a
whole
team,
section
right?
Back here,
That's-
this blue note.
We're sharpening.
We're sharpening, yeah, we're getting sharper by the minute, okay.
Hopefully.
Okay, next up is approval of the current agenda. You see it there, it's pretty basic. Just a few highlights there, and what we're gonna be talking about today. We have a great presentation on deck. Looking forward to that.
Pressure's on.
Yeah.
So if you would want to glance at this, or hopefully you had a chance to review it before you came in here, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as we have here?
So moved.
So moved. Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm sorry again, are we going to have a discussion after a motion is second?
Motion second, and you say any discussion.
Okay, the motion was seconded. Travis, what's your discussion?
Just again, a quick point, I don't want to slow things down, I know we've got a lot to accomplish here. As far as the agenda, one email I sent to staff, and with sunshine laws, communication can't go amongst us, we have to bring it up in the meeting, which is great. But one email I sent to staff, and I just wanted to bring it up now in case we wanted to add it to the agenda, is the importance of understanding the data we have available to ourselves and the quality of that data at the time of determining that criteria. So I know on our agenda we have a responsibility of coming up with that criteria, and I didn't know if it made sense to, before we got there, discuss the data sources we had, or if that's perhaps in number 5 of the agenda, we should move number 5 to number 4 and 4 to number 5. And again, the only reason I say that is because I almost feel like it's hard to come up with criteria if you don't know what data is available to satisfy that criteria. Does that make sense?
Okay, I don't see a 5.
Me neither.
Yeah, I think he's talking 3 and 4.
Oh, 3 and 4.
Okay. I think, I agree with you, we do need to know what criteria is out there. I'm thinking that's something you're gonna cover in your
I
presentation.
was gonna say, I may be able to help with
Yeah.
that through my presentation, discussion of some data sources.
Perfect.
Yeah.
In our questioning, were you suggesting maybe we switch 3 and 4 so that we hear about that ahead of time?
Yeah, and-
We may hear about it in 2 anyway.
Here's an example, so one of our criteria, or one of the responsibilities given to the board is to, preserve archaeological resources. And so in the links, the maps, that was sent out by Jan and Ryan, I found one kind of map about archaeological resources, but it was an archaeological probability map. And it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily indicate that archaeological resources are there. So is that our data source, or do we have another data source that we can give? So I guess before we start coming up with criteria, I just wanted to say, hey, time out. Is that data actually available, or can it be produced before we get to really working on a matrix?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
The cultural resource data in the state of Florida is administered by the Department of State, the Division of Historical Resources, and the county or any entity cannot release where those known sites are. It's protected. In fact, it's actually, what's the proper term, since I know we have an attorney in here? It's exempt from public records requests. So it is that well protected. But they can apply it. So in other words, if we come up with a bunch of parcels, they have the data. I work for the city. I have the data, and we can look at those. And I actually will be looking. It's important to me that if there's cultural resources, if we have two pieces of property of ecological value that's similar, but one has important cultural resources, to me that's a big bump. So yeah, we will be looking at that. But again, it's not for public dissemination.
That's why they do the probability maps, because it's sort of this general area was high activity or whatever, but it's, otherwise you're gonna get people out there with
Very sensitive.
shovels and detectors and things.
But it is incredibly important, especially depending on where you are in the county. Some places you can't kick dirt without disturbing a cultural resource.
Well, and then, sometimes you don't know they're there, like with the Pirate Museum, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, there's a whole building and city underneath. So, yeah.
What about, I think you probably got involved in this too. What about plants that are sacred or critical to Native American heritage here? I mean, we got involved in that every time we tried to.
The Florida Natural Inventories list includes that, and I think that's one of the criteria. If it's not, I made a note for it to be on it. But FNA identifies a lot of that.
But you can't point out this is a sacred plant either. I mean, that's one of those.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
Well, he's talking about cultural resource stuff,
Yeah.
not listed plants. Different.
So that would
different
apply,
thing.
what you just said
Yeah.
would apply to medicinal plants to
And
Native
here,
Americans.
yeah.
That would be a cultural resource.
Potentially.
Is that right?
Potentially, it could be, yeah. But because of your federal context in your old job, it's different because then the tribes can get involved in anything that you guys do.
Yeah, they do.
And whereas we don't have to be as concerned about what the tribes would be concerned, we have to always take that into consideration, but it doesn't drive it like it does them. But yeah, it's just common sense that the more we find out about a piece of property, the better judgment we can make. Simple.
What about protection of endangered or species of interest?
That will be definitely
Is
an
that
important
cultural?
consideration. No.
That's environmental. That's
Natural.
one of the things I added on the matrix.
Yeah, that's very
So
important.
what does the county do now if we find an endangered or species of interest somewhere?
Like on private property?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's very site-specific, but so it depends on the type of species that's listed out there, whether plant, animal, or whatnot. But usually there's other agencies that have methodologies for surveying them, as well as management of them on-site or off-site, such as gopher tortoise. You have to survey for their burrows and then take them off-site with an FWC permit. And those surveys are required by our land development code for any development.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if I may.
I was gonna grab
So
it.
we're on approving the agenda, where I think all of this is valuable discussion we could get into.
Yeah, we need to
when
get- we need
those
to
agenda
finish.
items. Yeah, I think that'd be great. So I don't want to skip over Travis's point.
Yeah, so
Make
let's.
sure that we have that
oh,
discussion.
Excuse me.
Not at all.
Yeah, before we continue, let's silence our phones with the whistles and the buzzers and your favorite rock and roll music. Thank you. So,
Oh, man.
help me back up. Did we approve the current agenda?
We
did
did
not.
not. We were under discussion.
You were about
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so does that conclude our discussion on the current agenda?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Then the motion, the current agenda is approved.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, we have to vote on that.
We still have to
so
vote.
Yes.
Sorry,
Okay.
Mike.
Does anybody
Sorry.
oppose the, or all in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? Got that, Ryan?
Got it.
Okay. Are we ready to move on?
We are, man.
Where's that noise coming from, please? Okay. Moving on the agenda, looks like we have number 1, open discussion by the board on the bylaws.
So that was included in your package there.
Yep, that was included in our first package last week, and hoping most of us reviewed those.
And these bylaws were taken from other boards in the county and then crafted specifically for this board by our Office of County Attorney. So that's where these came from.
Okay,
Are there any changes in the from the packet you gave us today to what we got last month?
No changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
so do we have any discussion on the bylaws?
I don't know how specific they have to get, but in the meeting schedule, I know we modified that somewhat.
Already, right.
Initially, but I don't know if that needs to be recorded in the bylaws document by any means.
Because it says we may meet more frequently.
It does say we meet more frequently. Yeah, exactly.
So that should
That was
be
the only-
covered, huh?
the
Yep,
only thing I
okay,
saw.
okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mike.
I had a question on the annual reports. Where is that from? Because I didn't see that described in the ordinance. And I didn't know if that was something, I mean, we got a lot to accomplish as a board. And when I read it, I felt like we haven't talked about a mission statement or a separate mission statement. I think that's probably pretty clear from the ordinance. So do we need to produce an annual report, I guess is the question.
So this is on page 2, about 3/4 of the way down the page.
So in the organization of the board, the rules of the Board of County Commissioners that we got, what's the front page look like? That, rules and policies of the Board of County Commissioners. Okay, so on page 20 of that, it says, each individual board and committee appointed by the Board of County Commissioners shall develop its own individual mission statement and submit such to the Board of County Commissioners within 6 months of said appointment. And then on the annual report thing, it says, highlighted there. Budget, we gotta submit within time and in the manner provided an annual budget, and then an annual report. This is on page 22. Each board committee must submit an annual report to the Board of County Commissioners by April 1st.
That answers that, we need to do
So,
it.
yeah, so there's rules that govern our rules.
So that should be, I guess, at some point added to an agenda to have a mission statement.
Yeah, and I don't know that we're meeting again before April 1st, so we gotta kind of do our annual report. Hey, thanks for appointing us. We're just getting started.
And realistically, it could be that simple.
Yeah.
You know, I think that was written that way with the intention of having 6 months to a year of
Correct.
service to have something accomplished.
To report.
Yeah, and probably just by virtue that we just formulated ourselves.
Yeah.
Is a pretty good result.
I had just highlighted them just because I didn't want any Ryan catch-22s coming back to get us.
Gotcha.
So I want to make sure that whatever needs to be submitted, we submit in a timely manner so that we're all,
Yep.
And that will be submitted as a group or by our chairman with our approval?
that doesn't say.
I know it doesn't
just says
say.
that board shall. And then within our stuff, it just says we shall submit an annual report. Oh, and this one says by October 1st. However, the board thing says by April 1st. That's interesting.
Yes. I should get clarification on that from, I blanked out on her name, the county attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and-
or, I bet, you guys as a board can probably set whatever time of the year. Because
Right.
we sort of started at the beginning of the year, so maybe at the end of the year, we submit the
Well,
report
and
up to you.
October 1st is generally good just because,
Fiscal year.
fiscal year and everything.
Right.
So, if we're supposed to submit a budget and stuff. I know April 1st, one of the reasons for that is they're going into budget for the
Prep.
next year. And, you know, that's always good to submit stuff, I don't know.
Well, realistically, something from this board by April 1st is going to be really tough.
Other than just saying,
That we formed.
hey,
It's
we're
been
here.
established.
Yeah.
We've had two
Yeah.
meetings.
And the process for submitting that, who does it go to? Does it go through staff?
Yeah, it would
To
be.
the commission?
Yes, from Mr. Adams as the chair, it'll go through staff, and then we'll
And you'll,
provide it to the board.
okay.
Also says
That's a
in
big
here-
task for you for April, brother.
Yeah, it says all in here, we're not allowed to harass employees, and we have to have decorum and civility.
That'll never work.
I know, tough.
Any other discussion on the bylaws?
Only one other question. This is page 3, under public comment. And it says, members of the public shall be given the reasonable opportunity to be heard on a proposition before the board prior to any official action. It's just, I guess it's more of a question. Official action being what? Is that a voted thing? So prior to any official action, the public has an opportunity to comment. Is that captured in the public comment time period?
After each item, there will be a time, 3 minutes each, for public comment to address the item before the vote.
So, but not like the votes we just did as far as the agenda. That would,
Correct, yeah. At the beginning of the agenda, you'll have the 3 minutes each for items not on the agenda for public comment. And then after each item, you'll have
Gotcha.
another
Perfect. Thank you.
section.
General availability.
yeah.
So am I interpreting this correctly? We have 4 items on here, so after like number 1,
Then you'll open it up for public comment before the vote.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha, okay. All right, anything else on the bylaws from the board?
No, actually, it looks pretty good.
I thought so
They're
too.
pretty straightforward. What's the attorney, Christine, is that her name?
Uh-huh.
Phew, finally came to me.
So do we have a motion to approve the bylaws?
I so move.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Okay. Now I would ask for comments, Ryan, from the public.
Actually, you're supposed to do comments before we vote.
Yeah, before each item, so,
Before we vote.
yeah,
Before we vote, okay.
Yes, we-
that's correct.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
I should have helped you on
Okay.
that.
Well, I solicited a motion, so it was my fault.
No, it's all
Okay.
all
No,
good.
well,
Okay.
so
Yeah, but
the
Holly and I are
order
here
of
to help,
things-
man. It's
The order of things is,
Don't
you
rely on
can
me.
solicit a motion, and then we discuss, and then we ask for public
Okay.
comment, and
then
then
we vote.
correct.
That's sort of, if we're doing Roberts, that's sort of.
Okay.
Thank
Okay, so at this time, do we have any public comment on item number 1 on the agenda, bylaws? I don't see any public comment,
Okay.
so we will again approve the motion to accept the bylaws. Everybody good?
We're good.
Okay, I've been looking forward to this since I knew it was coming up. Your presentation.
Uh-oh.
Elizabeth Guthrie over here.
Okay.
She's ready for a presentation on the potential matrix criteria and design. This may help you feel a little bit better,
This
Travis.
what you want right here? You
Yeah.
want the-
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Could I use that?
Certainly.
maybe?
Yep.
Okay.
There you
I
go.
actually prefer to stand up if that's okay. It's just the professor in me. All right. So, the agenda item, I will say, is a little bit misleading. I am going to do that, yes, but this is only our second meeting as a board. So I actually want to take us back a little bit and look at the whole process and talk about a way that we can get from the ordinance language to recommending projects to the commission. Okay, so this is a process that I have used with different land trusts in Florida. Similar process was used in Nassau County to develop their plan. So this is something I'm intimately familiar with, and I'm just going to walk us through examples of ways to get through the process. So, first, determine criteria. Okay, so we've got a little bit of this defined already in our ordinance. Okay, we've got these large buckets that have been set out. So we can't really stray from these. Generally, we need to be able to justify acquisition of a property based on these objectives. Every property doesn't have to meet them all, but we've got to be able to point to something on this list. But this is not specific enough for what we're going to need to be able to discuss individual properties. So if we're looking at something like water resources, this is kind of getting to your point, you know, are we evaluating properties based on their surface water characteristics, groundwater, aquifer recharge, impaired watersheds? Okay, there's a lot of different things related to water that we may want to evaluate. So all of this comes down to the data that's available to us, and there is a ton of data out there. Florida does a really great job about making this data public. So I'm not going to focus too much on this right now because I think we want to take more time specifically to look at this. But I will say there are a lot of examples out there of data sets that have been used. I can, you know, compile some of that information based on things that I've used as a starting point. Okay, so we have to meet these criteria. But there are some other things we want to consider at this stage too, and we've talked about some of these things. Funding opportunities, where are the Florida Forever project areas? What are the priorities of other agencies? You know, a lot of conservation agencies have already identified additional acquisitions that they would like to target. That information is available, we can pull that in. There may be other things we want to consider too. One example is sea level rise as part of our decision-making process. You know, if we look at a property and it's going to be underwater in 50 years, do we want to spend our money on that? We might, if it's mitigation for another property, or we might not. So there are some, I'm sure all of us have been thinking about some of these additional criteria that we might want to evaluate a property against, but the important thing is that all of these things need to be mappable. We need to be able to look at them on a map. Okay. So we can gather all this data, we can look at maps. We've seen these maps, these are some from the county, historic resources, Parks and Rec. And so what we would end up with is like 15 to 20 different maps, but we don't want that. We want to streamline. What we really want is one map with everything on it, okay? So that's where we want to get to. So if we're able to decide on the criteria, a couple slides back, we can pull that GIS data and put it all together into one map, okay? That's going to make everybody's lives a lot easier. We can stick it into GIS, you know, work with county staff on that, and then end up with something more usable. And this is a process that a lot of organizations use. The Critical Lands and Waters Identification Project is a long-running project in the state of Florida. Basically, they do what I've kind of explained here, take different data sets, smash them together, that's the technical term. And then we end up with maps that show us where we've got a ton of criteria or resources showing up darker, and then areas where there are fewer are lighter colored, okay? So this is what Nassau County did in their process. And they just used a different color scheme. So in this way, we've got kind of like a little heat map, things that overlapped. You know, we've got kind of our conservation hotspots, so to speak. And for Nassau County, water resources were the most important to them. So another thing we need to think about as a board in our criteria discussion is how we want to rank those criteria. Or is everything equally important to us? In the case of Nassau County, they said water was most important, followed by wildlife habitat, then outdoor recreation, I think then forest lands, and maybe one other criteria. But we can see how that pans out. Things along St. Mary's River, the Nassau River, Amelia River, those are the hot spots. Okay, so that's a reflection of their ranking and criteria. But this is just a starting point. This is not the only tool that we would want to use. Because just because something's blue doesn't mean it's a bad project. Just because something's red doesn't mean it's the best project. But this is something that allows for more transparency, because this is something that we could provide to the public. And that's what Nassau County did. anybody can go to their website and look at this and see at least one component of how their program is called CLAM, so how their CLAM advisory board is making decisions. Okay. The other thing that this does for us as a board is it takes the pressure off of us as individual board members to know everything about all the resources on all the properties. So we've kind of taken this first step and we've got that done. So when we look at a property, in Nassau County, they took that and matched it up with their parcel data. So you can actually click on an individual parcel and see how it ranked according to each criteria. So another way to help us out in our process. And so they've got the total score at the top. So this property scored a 45 out of 60, so that's pretty good. This big green blob is existing conservation land, so that's probably one of the reasons why it ranks so highly. You know, adjacent, conservation, connectivity, okay? So we would be able to click on any potential parcel, as with the public, if we go this route, I'm speaking in hypotheticals, of course, and see how it ranks according to the criteria that we decided upon.
Can I,
Yeah, sure.
one thing and you're aware of this, but you might just not be thinking out loud to say this. We have to be careful with the data. There's there's insane data out there. We're so lucky. But in many cases, like she threw up a map of what was called CLIP, and I was on CLIP. It's too coarse for some things because the data is just way too coarse. That's okay. That still gets you narrowing down. But what'll happen, and we did analysis when I worked at the Water Management District about lands for potential surplus. Same thing. It was more coarse. It was less coarse than CLIP. But the same thing, cities and counties were starting to use that and saying, oh, look, this scored really, really well. Well, it wasn't meant for looking at something as small as the city of St. Augustine. It's too coarse.
Right.
So we have to be cognizant of that
Yes.
whenever we do that. But it does say what it tells you. Look here, and that's the value of that data.
Yeah, starting point. Right?
Starting point.
It's better than nothing.
Way better than nothing.
Way better than nothing. And I will talk about exactly what you're talking about here in a second.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So, project nomination, we've had an example of that today. Thank you. So how do we handle that aspect of it? We can look at what Nassau County did. They have a form on their website, so anybody can go to the CLAM website and click on this nomination form link and enter information. We'll get that form. And there's two components to the form. One, information about the property. Where is it? Tax parcel ID. Also, is there any match funding coming with this? So if we have an organization, they've already raised half the money, that's really important for us to know up front. That could factor into ranking later. And then landowner information, okay? Anybody is allowed to nominate any property regardless of the landowner being aware. So we know this is a willing seller program. The landowner has to be involved at some point. So if they are, they can sign off, but it does not prevent somebody from nominating a property. Okay, so they submit this form. If they've got maps or pictures, they want to write a narrative, submit. Okay, and that goes to a contact of the county in the case of what Nassau County is doing. And so this comes to a staff member. The first thing they would do is go to that database, put in the score from the map, so that's kind of like our natural resource score. And then there's a section for like risk and liability. So we're not just the acquisition board, we got to think about management long term. So things that staff could be looking at are significant obstacles to management, environmental hazards, is there access, is the property already largely protected by a regulatory mechanism? Is it sovereign submerged lands? Is there an easement on it already? Are there structures on the property? And is the landowner participating? Okay, so these are the things that Nassau County is looking at, and they can actually deduct points based on some of these characteristics. The other thing that staff looks at this point is the value. So we've got our criteria, our risks, and now cost. So we've got our base cost, and then they can adjust it depending on if it's an easement or if there's match funding. And then at the end, we end up with this score, which is kind of like a bang for your buck score. So the higher you score in the criteria and the cheaper the property is, the better it's gonna rank out. So that's the way they're measuring that stuff. So basically what they end up with is a way for their board members to evaluate properties. Before the meetings, they would get that nomination form, the ranking form, and some maps. Then at the advisory board meeting is when anyone would be welcome to provide input on that property. So the nominator, anybody from the public, us as board members, we can nominate properties too. And this is where it's really important to bring in local knowledge because, as JB mentioned, data is not perfect. We can't rely exclusively on the data. So it may say there's no endangered species habitat there, but someone may know for a fact that there is. That is important information that can be brought to this meeting, and we can actually modify scores based on that input and say this property should actually rank higher because of X, Y, Z. Okay. So through all that, you would end up with a list of ranked properties, just ongoing, that are always around. And then we decide which ones are submitted to the commission. So we could say, we look at the top 10 and we vote majority, which 5 go to the commission. But that's that, okay? All right, class dismissed.
Thanks, Mom. Where is, it is very helpful. Where is Nassau County in their process? Because I know it's still evolving.
Yes, it's
'Cause
still evolving.
They did a bond?
They were working on the bond. I'm not sure where they are with that.
It was pretty big. It was like 30 million, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pretty big.
Yeah.
Their advisory board has been meeting since last July, and they put out their request for nominations. I think those were due at the end of last month, so they're about to start going through their first ranking cycle.
That gives us an idea of what time we should probably be on as well, more or less.
Yeah, and I called their county manager yesterday, but he was busy because I wanted to see how things were going. So if I get that insight, I'll be happy to share that.
Cool,
Thanks
thanks.
for the help.
That's well done.
Thanks.
You know, I had something very similar through the chair. Just wanted to let you know, I was looking at Sarasota County. They're actually quite involved in that same type of thing that Nassau is.
They just passed a new bond.
Same type of stuff that you were just talking about. So, you know, we're not really reinventing the wheel here, but just wanted to show you. They also have a nomination form, just like you said, for Nassau. And so I think I have that nomination form up too. Might be, you know, again, very similar to what you were saying, based on, you know, where it is in the landscape, the location, and those list of features that you just talked about, the resources that are there. So, you know, it depends on, you know, the level of integration the board wants, how that process to go. You know, you have a nomination form where some, you know, the citizens or anybody can submit that. You submit something yourself. How you want that process to go. So that was a good presentation.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's really valuable, especially the forms, because that gives us like a very concise summary of what we're talking about here, what we're looking at. A couple of those forms filled out in a map would really help us understand what the property is all about. So I think Ryan, we should probably aim for developing something like that in our site evaluation matrix, or criteria, or whatever, protocols, whatever we're talking about here. I think formulating a form, and it could be just as simple as changing Sarasota County to St. Johns County,
Right.
or Nassau County to St. Johns County.
Or a hybrid of the two.
Yeah.
exactly.
Sure.
More
Yeah.
likely a
Yep.
hybrid
Take
of the
the
two.
best,
The best of
Yeah,
everything.
that's right.
Above.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I know there's 2 or 3 other counties that just recently went through and passed bonds. And do you know?
Gainesville
God, I can't remember, there's,
or
Volusia?
Alachua did, and.
but there were a couple.
Volusia.
Volusia did again, yeah, they just did about like their 10th or something. They're way ahead of us in terms of, you know, how much they've
Well,
done.
I mean, Hillsborough's program is just to die for. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'm a,
So,
So Ryan, could that be something that maybe staff could do, is research existing programs at county levels in our state?
Sure, as far as,
And kind of see, I mean, we got a couple good examples. You have Sarasota, she's just brought Nassau to our attention.
well, just, you could just send us you could just send
they
us
used to
a,
work for ELAP in
yeah.
Hillsborough.
But you just
Yeah.
send us a list of those, and then we can just Google them and go look
Okay,
at them ourselves,
okay.
or send us
Yeah.
the URLs, whatever.
yep,
But if Hillsborough is the top dog, then
It's one of them.
Well, I mean,
we should look at
I
it.
totally thought Preservation Project was in Jacksonville compared to ELAP. We just were like, oh yeah, that looks good, that's for sale. Yeah, no, ELAP is real impressive.
Is that the Hillsborough
Yeah.
county? Okay.
yeah.
Evolution
forget what that
Forever's
stands
been at it a
for.
long time and
Yeah.
been incredibly successful.
Yeah.
How about Flagler County? Do they have anything going, Ryan?
Very small.
Yeah, they're small,
They're
but,
just do preservation projects,
Yeah, yeah.
from Florida Forever stuff, nothing structured.
But they have 2 dedicated staff to work on those lands, which unfortunately this county does not. Do you have a land manager yet?
it's just me.
That's what I was afraid. You didn't-
That's one
you
of
didn't
his
replace
hats.
Jeremy? You didn't replace Jeremy?
That position has sort of been morphed, and, yeah.
Okay, well, thanks, Elizabeth. That was really good, and that generated some good discussion that I think will benefit us in the long run. Ryan, I'm not sure what you have here, the little bullet under number 2, the first one, presentation on other local government processes.
That's exactly what she.
Just
Oh, okay.
NAFTA.
Yeah.
That's what she was telling.
Yeah,
Okay, so those 2 sub-bullets are all part of number 2.
yeah.
Okay,
Just jumping off points for discussion.
okay. So would our next item be asking for public comment on
That's
agenda
correct.
item number 2?
If discussion is complete.
How about at the board level? Any further discussion at our board level? Really good discussion, by the way. Okay, at this time, we could open it up to the public. Is there any comment or discussion on what Elizabeth just presented? Mr. Davies?
Yes.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I would just cautionary or explore the funding and staff resources available to create this criteria, in that is a VW version adequate, or does the Cadillac need to be done? And can they even be afforded, or is there funding out there? I mean, we just talked, Ryan seems to be the only staff member. Are things
Unfortunately.
structured such that he can leverage off of other resources to create what it is for
Yeah,
what's to
they have a really good GIS department. They can do a lot of really good stuff. And the data's free.
And they have a mandate that this would be a relative high priority for them to work on, as opposed to saying, we'll get to it when we get to it. And meanwhile, this board's not able to take action.
I don't know about a high priority. I'm not sure about that, but I would hope so. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And any other public question, comment, discussion?
Can I ask a question? Is that okay? How did the other county come up with $30 million for their land program?
Clam.
Has it been over time? Has it been something that's been?
I don't know if they have done it yet. I haven't kept up with it.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I thought I heard somebody say they had $30 million.
No, that was what they were planning on bonding,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's through bonds.
through bonds.
A lot of times it's through bonds.
So that's a target, perhaps, not necessarily in the bank account right now.
Well, and they don't have to do all one bond either. They can do multiple bonds as, you know, they don't have to do 30 million at one time. I don't know how they're going to
That's
do
how
it.
they cure the
Most
money.
counties are using bonds. Yep.
And then the other thing that happens is there's these other organizations and agencies that match. So all of a sudden your money doubles and triples and that type of thing, and then it allows you more buying power. You had another question?
Sure, I just had a quick comment for the record. Jen Lundberg, Matanzas Riverkeeper. My comment was just, I know that the board is meeting more frequently than originally anticipated at the beginning to get things set up. The left part of my brain is just we've been working on this project and getting it set up for a couple of years now. So I would appreciate any insight as far as the timeline goes. If the board had any internal discussion about when you want to try and plan on having your criteria done, when you want to plan on having your nomination forms done, just to kind of keep you guys on the right track. I know that there are so many other great options out there, that perfect can be the enemy of good sometimes. Obviously, you want to see what's out there and use the best information, the best processes from other places, but also we need to get the ball rolling on this because there's not a lot of Florida Forever funding and it's going to be hard to get it. So the quicker we can get moving on this, the better, I think.
Just for the benefit of the public and the group here, can you identify your organization and
Sure.
who you're representing?
Yep, I am the Matanzas Riverkeeper. We are a nonprofit advocacy organization that does clean water work for the Guantanamo Matanzas watershed based out of St. Augustine, Florida.
And she organized an amazing cleanup last weekend at Fish Island Preserve.
And she saved Fish Island Preserve.
Single-handedly. No, just
50 of us testified that she was the brains of the outfit.
So just so you all know, that's who she is. Yeah. An amazing lady.
Thanks all.
Yes, sir.
One other point, other than bond issues, we also have available a lot of money from feds that could be allocated. And I know Henry Dean wants to spend $5 million of it on a new health care facility in West Augustine, but we could maybe take some of that money, get the BCC to vote to spend some of the millions that we're getting from the feds on the infrastructure and American recovery plan. So that's something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Okay.
I'll talk to them about it.
Yeah, we're all talking about the same thing here, so that's all good information. Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Are we ready to move on to number 3? Okay. Board discussion on matrix criteria and design. We've kind of been touching on that subject with almost all of our dialogue here this afternoon. You see the first bullet under there is develop matrix criteria and design. Does anybody who would like to start with any comments? I see some notes on some of your tables there on the matrix criteria and design.
I can start.
Okay, Shorty.
Okay. So on the acquisition criteria, I think, I would think that under the environmental goals, we would need to add something about providing habitat for listed species. It's always good points on grants. That species don't necessarily have to be there, but if it provides a habitat, then that allows for restoration, which on the one that restores degraded lands, that's good, but to me, the opportunity for restoration of degraded lands, you're not necessarily restoring the lands by acquiring them, but you might have to work into your management plan the commitment to restore.
Okay, explain more then. Are you not talking about is the land restorable?
Yeah.
Because that would be
well,
very important.
Right, it's the opportunity for restoration, because I just think we don't want to acquire something and then just let it sit and self-restore. I think we have to
Manage it.
Manage it. And I mean, if there's an opportunity for it to self-restore, that's great, but I think it might be more point value if there's a commitment to restoration, something that's severely degraded.
So how would you reward that then?
I don't know, I'm just trying
Oh, no, I'm asking.
You're the biologist.
So we need to come up, because I agree with you, restores degraded lands is kind of,
Well, it can be expensive too.
well, yeah, without question.
Yeah,
but that's
restoring degraded land.
But
Yeah.
when I look at a piece of land, I'm gonna look at the natural communities and all the stuff that goes into it, but I'm also gonna look at it, what's the quality of, let's say, a sandhill, although we're not gonna see any sandhills probably, but the quality of a flatwoods or something, or a mesocamic or something. And that's important to me when I look at it, but then if it's degraded, that's okay. What is the chance of it becoming in time with management of a quality that we'd all be very proud of?
Yeah.
And, some habitats like maritime hammock, thankfully, don't require as much management as other types of habitat. So how do you my point was, how do you word that?
Right, I mean, in the scheme of things on that map of the central corridor and everything, you got a whole bunch of farmland.
I was gonna say
You got a
that.
whole lot of cattle and a whole lot of manure and a whole lot of restoration that needs to happen there, even though it looks green. So how do we do that? I don't know how we do that. You guys are the biologists, but I just think we need some kind of creative language in there that allows us to account for something to be restorable. I mean, you also, they paved Paradise, and you can, have been opportunities where we've ripped out pavement and restored things. That's a whole lot more expensive to do something like that. Do we weigh those criteria in a restorable thing? You know, I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, and if you're talking about a swath in the middle of the county, and there happens to be well-managed cattle lands or well-managed pine plantations, there's nothing wrong with that. For megafauna, that's a good thing. They'll use it, you know, but that might not be the case for a rare plant or something. Obviously, they need the quality habitat. So it'd be a combination of all the above.
Right.
And I think another thing to consider is the geographic proximity of the site that you're talking about being restored. In other words, if it's surrounded by development and degraded conservation land or low-quality conservation land, it may not rank high enough to even give another look.
Well, sometimes
But
I
if
think
it-
something like that ranks even higher because, you know, you're saving that from becoming more degraded, built upon, you know.
It depends. It would probably get points in other categories.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah, the other thing I was gonna say was if it's on the edge of something that, you know, would make a larger contiguous parcel, like a corridor kind of a concept, I would think it would have more natural value because of that rather than being already surrounded by degrading lands.
Well, and then something that's already in the environmental is it establishes a connection to existing or proposed corridors. And that, to me, is also, you know, I would linking corridors. I think we have to keep that in mind, not just, well, the word connection, but I think links is important. You know, the walkway over Princess Place, over I-95, you know, who thought that we could make a natural corridor that the animals actually use over a major highway, but they do. And you know, so it's like we got to get creative in that providing links, just because there's a road there, you know, that. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up. I've got a bunch of other stuff in the other categories. You want me to keep going?
Well, if I could just make a comment real quick, Ryan. As far as our comments on this matrix, this table here, are you trying to capture all of it and then you're going to do some edits to this table?
Yes, so basically we try to clarify each point and then add or subtract or modify
Okay.
as you go. And then, you know, once you have it finalized, then I'll take that and then add it to the matrix for approval next time.
Okay, so kind of keep that in mind as we're having our thoughts on our comments on this, that he's trying to capture or change a few words.
You can have mine.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, so maybe if we have an official document that has all the changes that we've discussed today, I can try to jot that down as we talk.
Okay,
but, you know,
okay. And Shorty, that's a great idea. If one of you has really extensive comments, if you're comfortable with giving him
Yeah.
your comments, then you'll have it.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what kind of product we're going to get out of this exercise so that we have something better next time.
sure.
Is this yours?
Yeah, Jan and I both put this together, and again, these are just sort of off the top of our head, so we,
As a start.
as a
Yeah.
start.
Starting
It's a good
point.
start.
Yeah, it's a really
great
good start.
start.
Yeah.
And just remember, this is definitely not static.
Yep.
We're going to think about something, and I'm sure in about 4 or 5 months and go, oh crap, why
We've
didn't we
gotta
put that
add
on
that
there?
to the matrix, yeah.
And that's good.
Well,
Except that when you rank something, then and you add something in an important category, you have to really go back and re-rank.
Yeah.
But anyway, excuse me.
No, not at all. I was just gonna say in terms of like continuity or adjacent properties to those. And I don't know if that falls under the category of that environmental with the establishing connections, but I think it was on Nassau's, but I would tend to, well, I mean, who knows the piece of property we're gonna look at, but in general, the idea that it's connected to another one makes sort of management more manageable.
Exactly.
So I would want that in there somewhere, it's
Well,
one of
that's
the things I thought.
Also, grant points, it's one of the things they give you extra points on if it's adjacent to currently owned public lands.
Makes sense.
Yep.
So just kind of keep that in mind as we're giving our comments out on the table here, that he's trying to capture that, and then
I'll keep
if
writing
you
them
have
down, too.
extensive comments, if you could give him your copy. So continue, Shorty.
Okay, so does anybody else have thoughts on environmental?
As far as the restoring degraded lands category, I don't know if I would advocate for that being an acquisition criteria as much as like a management consideration. But that's just because thinking about how we're gonna be looking at these properties when they're coming to us, and that's gonna be something that's gonna be tough to judge. Because if it's currently farmland, then it's farmland, or if it's, you know, a certain habitat, so not 100% on that one. And then open or green space, do we want to define that any further?
I think, well, when Elizabeth was presenting, what struck me about the presentation was the structure she provided to us. And I think she began, Elizabeth, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the structure you had suggested to us started with the ordinance as the
driver.
as
Yeah.
the starting point.
Yeah.
So I guess I just don't want to, I guess my concern or caution would be, you know, I think we all have this in front of us and we're looking at it. And I just wonder if we should start with this, the ordinance, and then use each, you know, A, B, C, D that the commission has already given us as those lanes.
you did
I think
that,
she
right?
described them as
That's basically what.
That's where they,
That's
that's
where
where
they
they
got it
started
from?
from.
Yeah.
perfect.
And that's what I did too when I was
Yeah.
fleshing it out.
Because I think, and you identified that, you know, I know in our ordinance, it talks about rare, threatened, endangered, or endemic species, and you pointed out that's not in
Right.
here.
Right.
So I guess that's where I'm kind of thinking, if the process for us starts with the ordinance, we can begin to fill that out, and we may already have it, it may be already be on here, but at least that gives us the structure to make sure we've captured everything versus kind of just randomly saying, oh, we should add this, oh, I think we forgot that. So that would be my only point here, is that as we're starting to kind of launch into this, is let's make sure it ties back to the ordinance, which is
Yes.
really our roadmap.
Exactly.
Well, to take what Elizabeth said, I guess if you really want to look at it, preserving open or green space, as soon as it gets acquired, either by fee or less than fee, you just did that. I mean, really, what's more important is what Holly just said, is that, you know, is it adjacent to, or can we make, or is it close enough that you get it because it's like, wow, and we then look
We can
for what the
connect
connection
it.
would, yeah. Because we're going to actually be preserving open space and green space as soon as it gets acquired or protected by whatever instrument.
And to go off of what you stated, as far as provide habitat for listed species, that's sort of a subcategory of the first line, provides ecological diversity and habitat. You know, we'll certainly be doing site visits. I know you offered to do some site visits, and with our local knowledge of the area, can certainly visit the site and see if it does have something like gopher tortoise.
I just think it's a heavier thing, like we did scrub jay nesting and we got points for the scrub jay nesting, you know,
Right.
because they don't nest everywhere. And so it's just, it's more than we have deer. and-
Right.
you know?
No, I actually think that's a really important category,
Yeah.
especially
Okay.
for grant writing. Because every
Sorry,
grant,
my whole mind
no,
was
but every
focused
grant
there.
you're right is, does it have listed species?
Right.
First check. That's probably one of the
Exactly.
top things you're going to
I
check.
mean, I pulled the FCT grant and just started, so, you know.
So that's what I have for the first category under environmental, is to add or provide habitat for listed species. That's number one. Do we have a second one for that?
Adjacent properties, the connection to existing proposed corridors, but just sort of expand that thought.
And adjacent
Or maybe-
properties?
And maybe not define it as adjacent, but,
Connectivity.
Or potential to be connected or something.
Well, you're improving,
something a
you're
little more
improving
broad,
connectivity.
like- Yeah, I guess that's true.
Well, and I guess like what I was saying is, back to the FCT definition, right now when something's across the street from something, that's not counted as connected. But here we've got all the stuff at Princess Place and the Ag Museum, and the connection is over the I-95, and it's amazing, the diversity that happens there. So, you know, and Pelissier Creek
Geographical
connects it.
proximity or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, we
So-
can use that, yeah,
You know.
a distance metric or something like that. Say, is it
I'm
within?
going to every single FCT hearing and
quarter
change
mile.
that rule, because
It's
that
horrible.
just drives me nuts.
It's horrible.
And that would come in the refinement section. That wouldn't be necessarily in the GIS data.
Yeah.
It would be refinement, okay.
Excuse me, Shorty, for the
It could be in the
benefit,
GIS data.
for the
You can get
benefit,
connectivity for GIS too? Okay.
It's actually in there, one of the layers. Excuse me, Mike.
for the benefit of the public, could you identify the acronym?
Oh, FCT?
Yeah.
Florida Communities Trust is a sub-program of Florida Forever, and it provides acquisition criteria for smaller projects that are generally geared more towards outdoor resource-based recreation.
So one leads to another. How about Florida Forever?
Florida Forever is sort of the umbrella over the whole thing. And right now, there's $100 million in the budget for it, as of today. On both sides, House and Senate, but which is not nearly enough. And that's my political comment for the day. Anyway, it's a land acquisition program that we will be knowing and embracing before we're old enough.
So I would just like to say to the public, some of you know what these acronyms are, but if you
I'm
don't know
sorry.
an acronym that we use, just kindly raise your hand and then we'll get an explanation on it. Because I want to make sure that everybody understands these things that we're throwing around. Yes?
Appreciate that. I remember when Hazel O'Leary was Energy Secretary, she used to fine her staff a quarter for every time they used an acronym.
Well, we don't want to do that. Okay, continue on.
When Jeb Bush was governor, he put out a memo saying you can't use acronyms. And I'm like, dude, your name's an acronym. Anyway, I know.
Can I ask a question before you move on?
Yeah.
Is that farmland, what's it called? Ranchland Reserve, the one where putting big ranches and conservation easements, is that going to come back? Any discussion of that? Because that was
yes.
I thought that was an amazing program.
There is discussion of that, and I was on the, everything's under DEP now. And I was on the site yesterday, and it is still on there as one of the acquisition programs. However, it's working farms. They want to acquire
Right.
it for the farms to continue to produce
That's the whole
agriculture.
purpose of it, yeah, but allow them financially to be able to continue. Yeah, I mean, that was a great program.
Yeah.
And our past governor, I think, no, our current governor hated it.
It's still
It
in
didn't-
there.
it didn't fund
At
it.
the moment, it is all still in there.
Yeah.
If you want to look later on, I printed out the whole proposed budget.
I just remind everyone, we have about 45
I know,
minutes.
I'm a geek that
okay.
way, sorry.
Continue, please.
Okay, anything else on environment, y'all? Because you know I have a lot on recreation.
I do know that. I know that.
I'm anticipating
I
that.
Okay,
Let's push on.
so, provides passive recreation, diversity, and community need. All right, I would like to replace the word passive with outdoor resource-based recreation, because that is what's in
The language that's in it.
the language that's in the ordinance, thank you. I would also like to add a couple more criteria: that it provides access to land or water-based trails, and it expands existing resource-based properties,
So-
which is another.
Could you repeat, please?
Provides access to land or water-based trails. Yeah, well, I'm giving him my sheet anyway, because
Okay.
I made a copy of it.
Yeah, because he's trying to write profusely over here. He's doing a great job.
And then expands existing resource-based properties. One of the maps that's a little bit harder to find is a map that the county did in 2006 that is the St. Johns County Blueway Trail Greenway map.
Yeah, I do have that.
Yeah, I've got it, I
Okay.
printed it out too. And it's funny, because when you look at the dream wish that you guys have, we did community meetings all over the county, and people came. that were horseback riders and bikers and everything, and they identified trails all over the county. And both hard trails, equine trails, and water-based trails. And it's so similar to, it's sort of been evolved to what the maps are now. But one thing that's really neat is when we were doing the big DRI developments and they'd overlay it over the trail maps, part of what they'd have the developers do is build their piece of the trail map. And that's how we got big wide sidewalks along 2209 and stuff like that, was because we back at the time required them to do that. So you didn't just get the little teeny sidewalks, we got big wide. bikeable stuff.
More multi-use.
Multi-use trails. So I think that just keeping an eye on accessing those trails, or, you know, and LAMP was originally the agency, commission, whatever, board behind that Greenway Trail map way back in the early 2000s. So that was, I just think we need to keep that in mind, because that was part of our initial thing. Culture, does anybody else have anything else on
Do
recreation?
those, in your mind, do those go together?
Yeah.
The land, water-based trails, and the resource-based property? Like, is that under that resource-based property umbrella?
Well, resource-based property is, you know, doing hiking on pristine land and canoeing on beautiful, you know, water-based trails. They don't have to be the same property, you know, it's, yes, in my mind, all of it goes together, but,
The clarification was, I don't know, I mean, this is just a general
Sure.
question, not a comment on your comments, but how specific to get, how broad to remain for that sort of flexibility of property by property by property and what you encounter there, to be able to rank it well, I guess.
Well, it's going to be really subjective,
Yeah.
no matter what we do,
I guess.
but we want to be able to hit all those.
Yeah.
Because if something is clearly like, wow, we can put a canoe kayak launch here in an area that doesn't have any, that should score pretty dang high, as an
Yeah.
example.
And to make a comment on why we suggested passive, and, you know, it's sort of semantics, outdoor resource base, we can certainly have
Yeah.
that in there. To make a distinction, you know, hiking, biking, paddling,
it's
that sort
different
of
than
thing.
baseball and football.
Baseball and
Yes.
football, so I just wanted to make sure that distinction was there, you know.
Yeah.
we don't
And it's
want-
clearly outlined in our,
Yeah,
As opposed to like developed recreation.
correct.
Right.
Right.
Parks and Rec biz, it's active and passive, but it's trended more towards resource-based, so that you know that there's green things and running water and stuff.
No mowing.
No, there's mowing.
There's mowing.
There's
Okay.
mowing.
yeah, around
You
the,
get chiggers and ticks real bad if you don't mow a little bit. Okay, cultural resources, I didn't have anything to add to this, even though it's like my thing, but I think that covers it and it blends with what's in the ordinance. Anybody else have any thoughts?
yeah, I agree.
Okay. In education, I didn't have anything extra on the education one either. No? Okay. On infrastructure, I just added the links language in there again, just to make sure that we hit links somewhere in it. And then restoration costs. I think we might want to put something about sea level rise in here. That we're protecting from sea level rise by acquiring maybe some of the larger pieces of land to give the water somewhere to go, and that kind of thing. So I think,
What about just calling it, is it a resiliency project?
right,
Resiliency points.
And you wanted that under the acquisition,
It might be its own,
or just its own
It
might be its own goal.
infrastructure or its own goal or something, but yeah, I just, that thought wasn't captured here, and it's something we're hearing a lot.
Does the county have maps that address sea level rise?
Not currently. I know there's some federal maps out
Yeah.
there, and some state maps, but it's so generic. There's different models ranging from, you know, they have certain areas of the county that show, typical inundation over a period of time, but, I mean, we can certainly, have that in consideration.
I was gonna say, I think the city of St. Augustine might have something a little more detailed,
Yeah.
because they suffer all the time from
Well, it's
flooding.
I modeled it. I mean,
Yeah, it-
Yeah,
we
okay,
have
so
to
you're the
take it.
culprit.
No.
Well, no, it's like what JB said, there are state ones, but they're real big and,
Right.
you know.
Well, they have a certain amount of political sensitivity about them too.
Yeah, well, you got, Miami's gonna be completely underwater and,
Well, and that's what I'm
And St.
saying.
Augustine's lower.
Differing
St. Augustine's lower than
I was,
Lower
I
Miami, yeah.
I was gonna say, St. Johns County isn't the only entity that we should be considering, like you say, even though Ryan says St. Johns County may not have the data, a coastal city like downtown, the city of St. Augustine, I know they have data. And yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
The Corps
But-
update.
well, one of the things to answer one of your questions, one of the things you can do very easily is the county, even though it's, I think, 2013 or 14, the county has LiDAR, if you're familiar with LiDAR. There's LiDAR data, which has been turned into a digital elevation map, a DEM. And we have DEMs of the entire county, so we can look at a piece of property, and if it's 3 feet, that tells you something. If it's 6 or 8 feet, that's very important as well, because that's not going to flood anytime too terribly soon. If it's 2 feet or 1 feet, yeah, it's flooding.
I was just in
So-
Miami Beach, so they've already got the roads and the sidewalks above
Yep.
grade with the buildings there now. It's
Right.
absolutely, they're spending millions and millions of dollars.
They're getting ready.
So, yeah, we could, I don't know how you want to add that in, but DEM data is, digital elevation model data would be something I would use to look at any piece of property.
I think Shorty's position too, I mean, I agree. Do you buy that, or do you buy
Well-
land around to protect it, or what do we?
That's the tough
Yeah,
question.
yeah, are we protecting it from itself and then fixing it? Or are we buying land so that there's places for the water to spread out? And protecting future development from ending up, being impacted.
Mortgage guys will do that.
Okay, then I had,
Can I ask a quick question, and hopefully it's quick, but to learn from all of you, in terms of the infrastructure, and maybe I just need to reread the ordinance too, it may be more detailed in there, but what are we preserving in terms of infrastructure, for the county? What's under that umbrella?
I consider it when
What would score high for that?
when you're looking at infrastructure, if, does the property have any existing trail roads or road roads, any other existing facilities that might be on the property?
Could have a dock.
Could have a dock, could have an existing structure, home on it.
Bridges?
So that's what that's meant
Yeah,
by,
it's meant as what's already on
Okay.
it.
You know,
And what's its
So
use.
that's
of
man-made
suitable use.
infrastructure?
Yeah, and what's
Yeah.
Or
its
maybe
suitable
infrastructure
use
in
for-
itself is man-made?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
If there are
We could also
pipes or easements running
consider-
across it, or something in that realm of,
okay, because I interpreted that
I just don't know.
as more of like a proposed plan for what we would potentially do with the property down the road.
yeah, and it also depends on the plan itself, do we want to just keep it as preservation? Is it just a large wetland and we're going to keep it as is and preserve it in its existing condition? Or is it mostly pine plantation with an existing roadway network? And then, I've put in here access and improvements cost. Do we want to put in and install new trail roads? So that's kind of factoring that sliding scale.
Oh, so that's both then.
Yeah, it's kind of both,
Yeah.
yeah.
That'd be hard to score then, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Potentially?
It'd be-
Would it be better to break it into two things? What's there?
Existing maintenance costs.
Yeah, what's there, and then
Proposal.
in order for it to be a nice, happy, natural area, what would we want to do to it?
Well,
Is that right?
Scored high for lower cost. If we're not gonna do anything to it, it's gonna score high. If we are gonna do something to it, it
Okay.
would score a little lower. That was your,
Prioritization.
Well, we don't have to make a decision right now, but I think that's
Right.
something to think about, because
Yeah.
it might make more sense to break it out into two, I think.
Yeah, factoring heavily into the decision that we considered in this category is, out-of-pocket expenses to create something. Obviously, if it's a nice piece of property, we want it in the first place. But, just factoring those, existing versus no infrastructure,
So would it capture it if we put in there something for your editing purposes, existing and proposed?
yeah.
In trying to paraphrase our discussion here a little bit.
So do I understand this correctly, that the LAMP funds that we have are going to be directed for acquisition, but then also perhaps restoration, improvement, and maintenance?
I don't think,
No,
I don't think
it's
it can be
just
used.
acquisition.
I think it's only
It's
acquisition.
only acquisition, then the department that ends up with it, they've got to
Maintain it.
budget to.
The management side.
But the maintenance piece comes in here too on our acquisition thought process
right.
later on.
Yeah, because you don't want to buy a piece of property that's going to take whoever's going to be the manager of that piece of property, that's going to be a turd.
So the county's.
Because it just becomes, the agencies will go, we're not touching it.
Money pit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so my other big comment on this on acquisition is suitability for grant funding. I think that's definitely something that needs to be captured, is that, and is it on the radar of other agencies?
That was the thing I was going to put
Yeah.
out. Is it already on somebody else's
Is it
list?
listed in Water Management District, Fish and Wildlife?
Grant funding / matching funds.
No,
No?
is it listed for them for acquisition and management? So if we acquire it, it doesn't necessarily have to be the county that ends up managing it, it's within the county, but we've got a lot of properties that had been identified that now the Water Management District is managing,
And-
because it fit in with their plan better. But it was, initially, the Melbourne property is one that jumps in my mind, that was identified by LAMP years ago, and the Water Management District is managing that property now, and it's completely appropriate.
What property?
Joe Meldrum's Turpentine.
Out on
farm.
13.
Oh, the Meldrum family still owns it.
Yeah, I know.
It's just a CE.
Yeah.
That's a nice property.
It's great.
And we also need to go to the state managed lands, like Favourdike State Park and Anastasia and all those, and look at their optimum boundaries, because that's could be very important.
Yeah.
Those, we'd have to actually build that layer, because I don't think that's not any existing layer anywhere that I know of, unless you guys already did it.
Well, you can interpret to the best of your abilities what the state has published in their management plans and guess which parcels they've outlined. But that's data we can find. So just to be clear on that one, we've covered other agency priorities in terms of optimum boundaries, that sort of thing. And
Suitability.
if they're within a funding footprint. Okay, just checking.
So CE, for the benefit of the public, is conservation easement. If you didn't know.
Which can be regulatory or outright purchased. Or somebody could just donate it.
Yes.
Okay, Shorty,
That was all my
that was it.
comments.
I kind of got a sense that when she was taking the lead, we were all kind of chiming in with what we thought on each category. But if
I was trying to let you.
No, you were doing a good job. You were doing a good job. But I do want to say that I don't know if we have time for each of us to go through.
I'm
The-
not seeing any notes over.
No, because we were all contributing.
See it.
Yeah,
Again.
Travis, am I right? We were contributing as she was going.
And I
So
think it would be helpful to see what's, comes up with from the second, and then kind of.
Yep.
This is kind of, it may take a few steps.
yep. So what I'm trying to lead to here is if some of you or one of you has something that she didn't mention that you feel strongly about, we'll bring it up and Ryan will capture it on the edits.
I do.
So- Okay, I was going to come around this way, but
Sorry.
since you jumped up, go ahead.
Well, we already mentioned resiliency, but I'd like that idea as it being its own category, and then water category for water resources, surface, groundwater.
Surface groundwater.
Okay, so
All
that
the
in
above.
environmental, it says protects
Hydrologic
hydrological
resources,
resources.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, can we be more specific with that?
And make it a stronger thing.
Yeah.
Or, when we go to rank points with it, yeah. I know, I completely agree with you.
Well, I have my thought on this is when you say preserve hydrologic resources, that's nice and broad.
Yeah.
that really does give you, surface water, groundwater, wetlands.
Recharge, yeah.
Yeah, recharge, so I don't know if we want to get specific or stay broad. Think about that as you're doing the edits.
I think you might want to consider having its own category, its own goal, only because, yes, it is environmental, but it is very specific.
And again, it's very.
But broad, you want to make it broad, like it
big-
is.
Big state budget this year on water resources. And
Yeah, the water management districts are going to have been directed to
Yep.
come up with specific projects.
Yep.
We may get very lucky. There may be a bunch of projects that the St. John's identifies in St. John's County,
Yep.
and we can say, hey, guys,
We're ready.
because they're going to
Ready
get
for you.
we don't know what they're going to get, but they're going to probably get a pretty sizable chunk. Each of the water management districts will. They typically do.
Okay, Elizabeth, was
Oh,
there
that was,
anything else?
actually, that was what you sent, was it?
The two big ones for me.
Okay,
So did you want to maintain hydrologic resources or add to that?
I think we want to put that as a separate item.
Separate or its own
It's-
category?
Yeah, its own category, maybe change the font and add another line on the table here, and
Okay.
then perhaps next time we'll put a couple sub-bullets underneath it. But I think broad is good, because then it captures any kind of water resource that we're trying to consider here. Okay, anybody else at this table that has something that hasn't been covered yet?
Did you want to, yeah, because something that Elizabeth said, I don't know that we need to do it on here, but certainly if it's a aquifer recharge area and it's, the county only has so much of it, that to me is probably a really good thing, especially if it's a large enough piece of property. Now, it may be a small enough piece of property, but it really doesn't. So if it's real sandy, sandhill type habitats, likely it's recharged in the Floridan aquifer. So that's important.
We don't, yeah, we don't.
But so that's the most important thing probably for groundwater, but also impaired water bodies. Because there's a list, DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, puts out a list of impaired water bodies. And you could argue both ways. Do you want to buy something adjacent to an impaired water body or not? But I think those are important things to identify. I don't know that they have to be specifically in here. What do you think?
I've gone through processes where we've done that. Because we can also think about something like that helping to meet another agency meet their goals. So that could be another potential funding mechanism. If we're using land acquisition as a way to restore impaired water bodies, just another route for us to think about.
I think what's important to remember, and I think one of somebody on this side of the table said it, is that this is a dynamic thing that we're working on here. And even though we're getting it on paper and this is going to be our matrix and everything like that, it doesn't mean that we can't deviate from it and make exceptions.
Just a guide.
Yeah, it's just a guide. There may be a piece of property that comes up that is like, holy cow, we got to get this somehow.
Well,
We have to acquire this.
That's the,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
bonus slash other.
The other,
Just in case.
Yeah. So
Those are
keep,
valuable.
Keep that in mind, that this isn't like set in stone, and this is gonna bind us to our decision making and that kind of thing. So if we make a mistake today, we'll fix it next time.
Right.
And I think that is where so many other boards' expertise comes into play of like,
Yep.
here's why it should get raised up in
Right.
that
Right.
recommendation.
And other county programs too. We can learn a lot from other county programs, Sarasota and Nassau County, for example.
True.
Okay. Hold on a second. Any board members have any, Travis?
I just want to point out, generally from the structure of, again, if we're kind of going off of this, if we were to rank these, environmental has multiple categories to have a ranking, whereas education or infrastructure, we have 2 votes, right? So obviously that's going to skew the result, because not everyone's,
Yeah, unless you average it for each goal.
right. So that's what I guess I was
Have a
going
mean.
towards, does each goal get ultimately a number, or does each sort of subcategory get its own number, and then it's totaled at the bottom? I think just structurally, what makes sense?
Well, remember what Elizabeth, I'm pointing to her. What Elizabeth said, or say EG, said is that, Nassau County put extra weighting onto water resources? Those are the kind of things we will have to figure.
Yeah.
What do we, in other words, if environmental is something we want to weight extra because it's extra important to us, then you might have 2 or 3 subcategories that each get points.
But that being said, if the education component is big, we would
It's
open that up a
beyond
little
it.
bit more and give it points. See,
Yeah,
that's
I'm
what
just saying.
that's what I just said a few minutes ago,
Yeah.
that it can be modified as we're
Sure.
going. Yeah, that's the beauty about this whole
Yeah.
thing.
And
Yeah.
that was the only point I was trying to make, is maybe we should
Sure.
have some discussion or thought about that, as part of this process. The other thing that I'm still trying to reconcile in my mind is going back to Elizabeth's presentation, where there was kind of like 2 sort of opportunities for criteria to be applied. There was the one that kind of was an objective, where it wasn't, our own kind of opinion of this or that. And I thought that was beautiful, because one of the items in our ordinance is about having an objective selection criteria. And I focused in on objective when I read the ordinance, because I'm thinking objectivity is important, especially at the beginning of the process. So if we have an objective selection criteria that then funnels down to us, and then we kind of modify it with our on-the-site knowledge of, hey, I know this is this, I know this is here, there is endangered species, or that sort of thing, I think that's great, because then it gives us the flexibility to kind of modify, or if there's data that may be produced a score that's maybe old data or not accurate data, or it's too rough or whatever, that's a good thing. It gives us a chance to kind of work that. But as we go through this criteria, I keep bouncing back and forth. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about the GIS system that hopefully we have staff to create in a timely fashion? Or are we talking about the final selection criteria that we have at the very end? What are we discussing here? And I think it's all good discussion, but I guess I'm a little confused as, are we talking about GIS criteria, or are we talking about criteria here that when we finally do get a property, are we ranking it based on this criteria?
I think actually both, all.
That's what I was gonna say too.
But I'm trying to think how I want to say that right. Go ahead.
The GIS data
It just points
tells
us.
you the story and points you in the direction.
It's a more informed.
When Florida Forever ranks a piece of, when Florida Forever gets a property for ranking, and it's a pretty arduous process, because they actually have an entity, FNA, Florida Natural Areas Inventory, that actually does a lot of their biological work, or did, I think they still do.
Really?
And so what they do is, Florida Natural Areas Inventory has already come up with a suite of GIS layers, feature classes is what they're called. And so you can then equally, from FNA's standpoint, rank every piece equally. And so, and I can actually bring that data in if we want to see it sometime. We can actually, if somebody wants to. It's really pretty amazing stuff. And they rank everything in the state based initially on that. But there's so many other factors in this, and it's always going to be subjective scoring.
Yeah.
No matter what we do, it's, because I'm looking at Holly, but Holly might rank something very different than me because his priorities are different than my priorities. And that's good, because we're going to have 9 priorities, and when we come out at the end, we've all scored this. It's going to take everybody's points of view into context.
I think it's a little bit of both. So if we're using that as an example, and again, that's an example of a way that we can use this process, all of these things, all of these criteria, we could put into GIS real quick and have an initial score based on the GIS data. So this sheet could be filled in on one column, and it could say how it comes out in that process. Now, our job as a board is to decide if we agree with those scores. So, if something's ranked super high on endangered species habitat, we may want to look into that and figure out why. But if it comes up as 0, and somebody from the public or somebody on the board knows that it should be a lot higher, then we need to have an opportunity to adjust that
Right.
score somehow. So if that helps.
So the way I look at it, the data is like a tool for the subjective or objective decision.
And I guess
Gets
that's
you
where
started.
the question, and this was my original question about the importance of understanding the data up front before the criteria is, so on something that promotes environmental cultural resource education, something that talks about the improvement cost, how is that captured in the GIS data? And is it or not? So if it's
It is not.
No.
If it's not, then I guess not all of this is going to be GIS data. We're going to have a limitation to our GIS data, and then those are going to get factored in later.
Sure, you're gonna have staff and public presentations that capture some of that other stuff that, you know, the human element of it.
Okay.
I mean, I love GIS, but you wouldn't want that to be your decision maker.
Mhm.
Yeah. To add to that, we will have other staff, you know, other departments represented here when when it's necessary. You know, when we have a list of, you know, say we get a group of list of properties, you know, and we want to talk about scenarios and how that's going to work through the county's system. You know, we'll have those other department representatives here to answer.
So I guess a side question is then, are we going to want to be coming up with a list of GIS data sets? So is that a presentation that maybe Corey or somebody could make? I mean, I know you know the data, but I mean, Corey is kind of the boss or somebody.
We could have him provide a.
He's not his boss, but
Yeah. If there was an official request from the board to say, provide X type of data, or at least a presentation.
or an explanation of what those data are.
Yeah, we could have that happen.
I think that might be useful.
Yeah.
And Corey's probably not even familiar with a lot of the FNA data. Some of it he probably is, but a lot of
Used
people,
to be.
they don't, a lot of those folks don't use it very much.
Yeah.
I'm happy to help with that as well.
And I mean, I'll do the same thing. Either one of us could make a presentation, but it seems like it should probably come from county staff.
A lot of that is when you go on the property appraisers database, there's a lot of layers on there that has all kinds of, you know.
Yeah, but it doesn't have the Florida Forever
That's-
assessment data.
No, but.
That's what
I
I'm
mean,
talking specifically
They can
about.
add layers, I mean, it's pretty informative.
I just want to comment on that. So our main effort here, we've got to get this to a form we think is usable, right? And
Yes,
then we
sir.
can start to gather data. So our next meeting, we need to try to.
Hammer that baby out.
Right, with
Yeah.
all the edits and comments that we're giving to Ryan, he's trying to capture those, and I believe the way I understand this, you're gonna make those, modify this table, and we're gonna go over it again the next time.
And you'll send it to us ahead of
And
time.
prior to the
Yeah,
meeting,
Yeah,
correct.
sweet.
And we need to get it to 80% and move on. We can't keep.
Correct.
Okay.
So we're down to the maintenance category, is that where we are
I
now?
didn't have anything to add on that.
No, bonus?
Didn't have anything to add.
I actually had something to add,
Sure.
thinking about it. Properties eminently considered for development vis-à-vis
Ooh, yeah.
Fish Island. We could add that as a category if through the chair, if so desired.
Endangered.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah,
that sounds pretty good.
That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
Do I have a motion? Do I need a motion to?
No,
No, just add it to the list.
This is all a discussion.
you're in charge, Michael. You just say, Ryan, please add.
Write that down. Yeah.
Do we
What did
want to
he
be,
say?
do we want to be a board that's identified as buying property to stop development?
Yes.
Well, I would say no. We
No,
want to.
we can't be that.
Because we're not. But this category he's talking about would be,
It's,
if we're ranking all this and we know, Fish Island actually is a really good example because
Yeah.
Fish Island was, the owner at the time said, I've already got plans for, I think it was D.R. Horton, to come in and do their thing. But then people came forward and said, and it was on the Florida Forever list, and people questioned it. He had that choice. And he chose to go that option, which delayed his project, and he was happy with that. But we know that was imminent. In fact, it closed 3 weeks before it was going to go to receivership at the bank.
wow.
So, like 2 weeks or 3, I think it was 3. Yeah, it was close. It was stupid
I don't
close.
know its story, but there's a value to a landowner to have the option.
Absolutely.
And to put that in front of them, even if they're a real estate developer.
Sure.
Of course, just one other option.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Well, by law, we
Um,
all have to be willing to work with willing sellers.
Yep.
We don't do eminent domain or anything.
Well, and in terms of having it as a category, it's one of this list of criteria, but it is something that I think to consider in terms of in terms of preservation, so.
Yeah, Fish Island's a great example.
Yeah, and I think of that category also as probably public support.
Public support.
But your
So
question,
to your point,
yeah.
yeah, I'm behind your question and concern.
And we're not in that business.
Well, our business, but we are in a business of trying to help. One of the things that was said is that this is one tool to help the county manage its growth. Acquisition is a tool. It's not the only tool, it's just one tool. And our job is, if that's gonna be a tool, then we need to find the best properties to buy. Or whatever. We'll probably end up getting some donations. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Well, we have something for staff reports that I'll be bringing up.
Okay. So, yeah.
We have a comment from the public on this, as we're closing down on this item. Go ahead.
Several things. First of all, 67 people spoke at the growth management workshop on January 25th. 67 witnesses, not one supported the overdevelopment of St. Johns County. The people have spoken, we need to be heard, and yes, we would buy property to stop development. That's why we're here. Now, in terms of cultural resources and archaeological resources and historical resources, I suggest that y'all might want to do a joint meeting at some stage with the CRRB, which is the Cultural Resources Review Board, and I'm sure they'll have some ideas. On Fish Island, one of the things that was most compelling was the fact that there's slave cabins in there. And the first crooked realtor in the history of Florida, Jesse Fish, you know the story, he said he was going to sell the property for the people from Spain who left in 1763, didn't give them their money, and then the people from Britain left in 1783, same thing, he ripped them off. So we have a historic place, it's a place where the first crooked realtor in the history of Florida was. But the slave cabins in there are part of the archaeology, which is really compelling to me. And we really ought to prioritize African American history and Native American history. And I would just point you all out to a wonderful property, it was a wonderful property, just south of St. Augustine High School on Lewis Speedway. And there's a 3,000 to 4,000 year old Indian Native American archaeological feature in there. I was in there with Robin Beddoe, the late Robin Beddoe, one of my mentors, and basically it's there's a water feature, a creek that winds around man-made mounds, and apparently, according to UF, the head of anthropology at UF I talked to, sent him the report that was attempted to be suppressed by the city of St. Augustine under Market 9. Apparently it was the burial place of a highly honored Indian Native American person like a cacique, chief, or shaman. And the city of St. Augustine, 3-2, allowed that to be turned into a strip mall and condos. And that's the kind of stuff we need to stop. Yes, we need to stop development. Bad development that destroys our history, because faster than a speeding dump truck, everything we know and love about St. Johns County is being destroyed. They're clear cutting, they're killing wildlife, they're killing water resources, they're destroying swamps, and it's got to stop. And it starts with us here. And also, in terms of public comment, could we please go back and put in the minutes from the first meeting, the public comment, because I was really kind of insulted that we were written out of it. It's kind of like the line in the movie Hunt for Red October, where Admiral Greer says on the sub.
They're back in.
No, but did you put in the minutes what I said in public comment?
No, but they didn't put in the minutes what I said either.
Well, they need to do good minutes, and we really need to ask the clerk of courts to do minutes. They need to do minutes, ladies and gentlemen.
3 minutes, right?
Minutes for the
10 seconds.
BCC and PCB, and Brian's too busy doing other stuff to be. Also, it's a conflict of interest for staff to be doing the minutes. It needs to be the clerk of courts. That's why they exist. They keep minutes for the county. And
Okay, thank you very much. We're at the 3 minute
I
mark.
didn't think I was done, but
Yeah, you are.
can we please give instructions to the staff to have the clerk of courts do the minutes and to do them right, and not insult the public by leaving out what we say?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
That's a lack of comedy and courtesy right there. I object.
Well, I would just speak to, I don't believe it was an intentional, I believe it was probably an oversight.
Negligent.
And so
Negligent?
if you could allow us
You're out of line.
the opportunity to rectiply that,
Thank you.
This is what we
I think that
have.
would be great.
Thank you.
So I think that's what we've moved to do so, and we'll take care of it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, very good. Let's see, does that wrap us up for item number 3 on the agenda?
Yes, you have public comment
I think
is
so.
completed, so we're good.
So we'll move on to item number 4, discuss priority lists from other agencies, web links sent to board members. Ryan, would that be you kind of going over those links that you and Jan sent us a
Yeah,
couple weeks back?
We provided a list of state agency links that have some good maps. For the majority of that, we can focus on the Florida Forever program. I do have it pulled up here. There's a list of priority acquisition lists that they have. So, like, for example, we have the 2021 Florida Forever priority list. And this is all, accessible online through the Department of Environmental Protection. So on this list, we have 3 different categories in our county. I believe the first one here is the Strategic Managed Area Lands List. That's a separate document that's also on the same website, so that is accessible to the public. And then we'll scroll down here. I actually have this in paper copy. I'm just kind of going blind here online.
You're good.
But
Quickly flip through to try and find any St. Johns County.
There's one.
There's one.
yeah, so Matanzas to Ocala Conservation Corridor. If you remember that map of the BOT or Board of Trustees Florida Forever project areas, you have the Matanzas to Ocala Conservation Corridor, and then let's see, further down this list.
Yeah, the climate change, Northeast
Blueway.
Florida Blueway,
So Northeast Florida Blueway, that's also on that map.
and St. John's River
St. John's
Blueways.
River Blueway.
And then St. John's River Blueway, I
Yeah.
believe it's further down.
No,
No, it was
just
right
Oh,
below
was
the.
Okay, I apologize.
And those,
There it is.
some of those links
Number
that you
6.
did send, if you followed them, you could get to the map that.
That's correct.
There's a lot of information.
So
Yeah.
those basically are the state's method for prioritizing properties through the Florida Forever program for potential acquisition. And so you'll see that in our county, those 3 areas identified that is on this list.
I think something, Holly, you said, just because it says medium or low on there, doesn't mean that they wouldn't buy it this year. It's just when they're trying to rank everything, some stuff is like the hottest. But Fish Island was a low, and it was only 3 properties acquired 2 years ago.
Often it's what's
The money.
available.
It's what's available.
And
So they've got a ranking, but once it comes available, then
They can jump it pretty
Your willing
quickly.
seller, your money available, the matches, all sorts of stuff.
They have their
Factors
own
in.
matrix
Yep.
categories that they follow. Most of it actually happens to be under the environmental component, but the financial stuff also.
But it's
comes
got to
in.
be on their list.
Yeah. And so that's the first 3 links that were talked about. Water management has their own lands management section there that they have, basically, so you're more familiar with those state lands in our county. There are maps there.
With a lot of overlap.
A lot of overlap. FWC, same thing, talks about wildlife and habitats that happen to be in the county. JB had talked about the Florida Areas Inventory, FNA for short. And let's see, there's a few other political groups there, 1,000 Friends of Florida, nature.org, that's additional data and tool sets potentially available, and the Florida Trail. We don't have the Florida Trail in our county. It's mostly in the central part of the state in the peninsula, but just to get an idea of how that's set up.
But we have the paddling trails.
We do have the paddling trail that is part of the Blueway system up the St. John's River.
And in Kansas.
Circumnavigational trail too.
Right.
Do we have a bike trail somewhere?
We have the Rails to Trails.
Rail trails.
Lots of bike
Greenway.
trails, yeah.
Yeah, the Greenway there. So that's basically just providing insight to the existing state programs that we have that prioritize land acquisition.
You know, I was at a meeting about 20 years ago, and somebody said, "You're wasting your money on rail trails. Nobody's going to use them."
Yeah, I hear that comment.
I've never seen one that's not gets a fair amount of use.
So funny.
Unless it's super rural, then it obviously gets a little less use. But
I used to live up in Virginia, and they're working
Oh, yeah.
everywhere.
on building one all the way from Richmond to Virginia Beach.
So
and
I-
they're doing a darn good job.
I
Yeah.
came
They're
back
awesome.
from Fernandina on Sunday down A1A, which I never do anymore, and a whole bunch of East Coast Greenway is built in both Nassau and Duval County. Then I get on the ferry to come across, And they say, welcome to the water portion of the East Coast Greenway. This is great. I haven't been on the ferry since they started saying that. Ryan, I got a question.
Sure.
And I did not get a chance to look at this, but the statewide flooding and sea level rise resilience plan that was submitted December 1st, 2021 is apparently a thing. And there right now is $270 million in change in the budget ask for that. So it's a pretty big thing. And that would be good if we could track down those maps, and I'll try too, but that was pretty neat. And then there's $20 million for Resilient Florida planning grants that might be of interest to access. But that big one, if we can find that map and see if we're identified in any of that, which I bet St. Augustine.
So those are statewide initiatives, right? Yeah.
So we have the Resilience Plan 2021, and then there's another resiliency study that you mentioned.
The Resilient Florida Planning Grant is a study, but this is the sea level rise statewide, and there was a sea level rise resilience plan submitted on December 1st, 2021.
Okay, so you have a plan and a grant.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And yeah, I found that reference like late last night, so I did not have a chance to
Does the
look at
plan mean it's funded?
it. If they sign the budget, yeah,
It's in the budget.
it's in the budget. In both houses right now, so it's pretty good.
Okay.
Ryan, was there anything else you'd like to?
That concludes our links that we were talking about.
Okay.
To public comment.
Okay,
or,
yep.
or board discussion.
You had a question?
Yes, does St. Johns County have a comprehensive resiliency plan, sustainable resiliency plan?
Did you mention that earlier, that they do not?
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I believe it was in the works for a while, but
Yeah.
I don't believe there is an
Yeah.
official plan.
I think the city does.
City
The
does.
city of St.
The
Augustine
city
does.
And Flagler County's working on it, but
Mhm.
I think St. John's would do its due diligence to start it up again. And let's get a resiliency plan.
Yeah, you're in charge, Ryan.
Yeah, unfortunately, that'd be in, I think, mostly the planning division, and obviously through the commission. We would have to, I'd have to ask around to see what the status of that is.
I think it needs to be rebirthed.
Yeah, yeah, that could be something, brought to the commission, as a form of public comment.
Have you approached the commission on it, or the planning?
No,
depart-
not
Okay,
yet. I've been in committee meetings.
I understand, yeah. Well, you're a good citizen going to all those committee meetings, because they'll wear you out,
Yeah, they did.
yeah. Any other public comments on that last item, number 4? Okay. Moving down on the agenda, board member reports. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Each of us may have an opportunity to say what's on our minds or give a report, what we might have on our
You want
mind.
to go around, or you want to take hands?
Yeah, I'll take hands, I think. Okay.
I read, I think it was last week, it might have been the week before, it doesn't really matter, that the now growth management director said at a commission meeting that a third of the county was in conservation. And so that seemed really high to me, and being a GIS nerd, I did my own evaluation and I did not come up with anything remotely resembling 30-something%. He said a third, so that could be anything. So I don't know how to express this, and that's why I want your all's direction. It worries me that if the public, and particularly the commission, thinks a third, and that is not the real number, that is misleading, and that could affect us and our ability to do what we've been charged with. So I don't know how, I don't know if that's we asked the county GIS to relook at that, but I mean, if you look on this map, one we all have, 25,000 acres stands out right there because that's not even in the county.
Yeah.
Well, laughing's not necessary, but yeah, it's that's, as far as I know, the county line ends at the shoreline, at the Colregs line. So, but that's just one thing, and it is part of the NER, which is in the county. So I think if it was a GIS exercise that somebody did not understanding the data, I can see how it got counted. I'm not pointing fingers because it's one of those things. But, and there's, I think, some double counting because when I read this, the Florida managed lands data, which comes from Florida Natural Areas Inventory, lists, for instance, all the mitigation banks because they're considered private but managed. The public can't use them in most cases, but they're conservation because they're managed lands. But they're also in the regulatory conservation easement up here at the top. So I think they were being double counted, which might have led to some of those numbers being potentially inflated, or not. That sounds bad. Being overcounted. Let's leave it at that. And also on one of the maps it said county conservation easements, and it had an acreage, and it said 50-something thousand acres. I downloaded the St. Johns River Water Management District's data, and I got 40-something thousand acres. I don't remember what the number was. So I think somebody needs to take a little more time and actually parse the data out, because that to me is a dangerous statement. I'm sure Mike made it based on all the information he had. I have no question about that, but if it happens to be 23%, which is what I think it's closer to, that's a big difference.
Was there any content when the statement was made?
It was at
In
the
which it was made?
growth management
Is that the Growth Management Workshop?
workshop. That was last week, I believe.
It was
That-
Monday or Tuesday. or
This
something.
map is a draft, and it was meant for planning purposes.
Yeah,
so-
I shouldn't even point to this, but 33% or 30-something%, a third is, I don't know, somebody gave Mike that
Yeah,
data.
It was made based off that map, I believe. It was
Yeah.
generated by our GIS department, so we'll have to get that.
Because I think it makes a big difference. I mean, the map's great, we know where everything is, but if people are assuming that it's 30-something% that the county's in, that's way off. I mean, 10% is huge.
Ryan, would it be possible that if there's another opportunity at a committee meeting or a board meeting like that, not this board, but to notify JB? He seems like he's pretty articulate with this subject. And would you be willing to come in and just say what you just said now?
I think if somebody in the GIS, and they do have some seriously well-schooled GIS people, but they might not understand the data.
Right.
And so if they redo this and recalculate it, I'll be happy to, if it's Corey, for instance, or somebody Corey appoints, I'll be happy to, because I am familiar with this data, really familiar with the data. And so if they're not double counting, that's I just know 30, you can't get, I mean, it's just 430,000 acres, the GIS says, is in the county. And so that's how big the county is, 430,000 plus acres. So, a 25,000 acre miscue off here is 5%. It's huge.
So I think we all agree with you and we see where you're going with this. I
Okay.
think,
I'll shut up.
No. I think by virtue of his capacity on this board, I think it would be appropriate that he maybe gets with your GIS department and make sure that they understand some of these interpretations on some of these maps.
Yeah, it could be something as simple as an email, to the GIS department. Just
If you give me a
confirming.
contact and I will do that, I'll reach out to him. Because, I mean, it doesn't do anybody any good to misrepresent the numbers.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing, there's some scientists at this table and maybe in the audience as well. And scientists know that data can be skewed.
Well, unintentionally. Of
Yeah,
course.
unintentionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe sometimes intentionally.
Well, that's the bad thing about GIS data, though, is because if you don't parse it, you have to.
Right.
I mean, it says county conservation easements. That's really St. Johns River Water Management District easements. But that's regulatory easements, that's purchased easements, that's anything that's in a CE. And you have to parse that out. It can include beautiful swamps that were protected because of a development and where the developer turned over
Mitigation.
that for mitigation.
Yeah.
But it could also be a stormwater pond, as an example. And it's going to also include mitigation banks. So you have to be real careful what that data is.
Okay.
Or they are.
And
Okay.
double counting is so easy to miss.
Oh.
Up in Jacksonville, they used to say they're the largest urban park system in the country. It's because the Temecula Preserve was counted as one thing, and then they didn't realize that within the Temecula Preserve is Big Talbot, Little Talbot, Fort Caroline, Fort George, and they counted those again, so they were off by 30,000 acres.
Well, and the GTM, the
Yeah.
Matanzas National Estuary Research Reserve, the GTM NER, that's a heck of a mouthful. Their boundary is 40-something thousand acres, but it's not really 40-something. I mean, they only have deed for
Right.
a couple thousand acres.
Right.
And like the entire Matanzas River, the open waters of the river down south of St. Augustine is all included in there. I don't know if that's conservation lands, but it's within the NER boundary, so they counted that as one boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah, that boundary also goes 3 miles offshore. Just
Right. Yeah, it goes 3 miles offshore, and I may be wrong, but my understanding is the county boundary ends at the shoreline, at what's called the Colragues demarcation line.
No, we had to get permits to go dump, concrete offshore for reefs, so I have a feeling you're right.
Yeah, the state starts
Yeah.
at the Colragues demarcation line and goes out 3 nautical miles.
Okay, folks, if I could jump in here, we're at 3:35,
Sorry.
and I wanted to find out, are there any other board reports that would like to belly up to the table and
Just have
give
two
some
quick-
comments? Okay.
One, question on the recording. Where does that exist, minutes? Because to Ed's point is, if we're not going to have detailed minutes, at least having an opportunity for the public to, discover what was discussed here. Is that uploaded online on a website somewhere?
Right now, it's uploaded through my computer, and it's available if anybody,
For
Anybody can request it, right?
upon request. Yeah.
Okay, so it's on, but like on the clerk of court website, like for all the other meetings, you could go to those meetings and essentially watch them.
Yeah.
Is anyone against, I guess, having the recorded meeting uploaded to that site, or is that possible? Just so that we're one additional board by the county commission, they can go to that, board, select the meeting and say, okay, I'm gonna at least listen to it.
That's possible. You can certainly have it posted if that's the desire.
I certainly have no objection. I can't imagine any of us having any problem with that. It's an open meeting.
I mean.
Yeah, Ryan, I think that's good unless anybody has, okay.
And then the second thing is, going back to the River Keeper's comment about the timing of things and how quickly we can move forward, it seems that the GIS tool that we're hoping to create, obviously depending on Ryan, who's got limited, he's stretched thin, I'm sure. We need that tool to do our job, right? We need that to implement what we're trying to do. Any thoughts or discussion, or, I guess, is the assumption that we just kind of come up with the best we can just to get the program rolling and then continue to try to refine that over time, or any sort of sense as far as what do we think we can achieve as far as the GIS tool, having that available so that we can actually start doing this?
The data exists, and we have a fantastic GIS department, so it's just a matter of putting the layers.
Choosing which data you want to use.
Yeah.
It's
You agree with that?
readily, I've got my GIS open right now, so it really depends on which data that you want. Because it's all out there, like
So it's
Shorty
quick.
was saying.
Yeah.
It's a quick,
Good,
I
okay.
think
Yeah.
most likely the criteria and getting that established is sort of stage one.
Yep.
And then GIS can probably catch us, but
Pick the layers that,
at that point,
suit
then we
us.
have to have properties to be able to evaluate.
Exactly.
Yes.
Between the time that we hear those or see those,
How
I would imagine it's
how about this?
addable.
Once we come up with our criteria, I'll be happy to put together, as long as I can make sure you've got it, and we can show it on this, and I'll put together all those layers and we can just show it live in GIS. Or Elizabeth can do it.
In a presentation?
In a presentation.
Yeah, perhaps by the next meeting?
Well, I don't think
Is that-
we won't have this
that
ready yet.
ambitious?
Because I would like to have this.
Finalized,
go.
okay.
You don't
So-
have to, because one could drive the other, or each could drive the other, but I think that would, I
Okay,
would feel more
I think,
comfortable.
I think that's a great idea if we all agree. I think the matrix is our first step, our big thing next meeting. And he's gonna make the edits on that, and we'll review it one more time. And like Jimmy said, it'll be done. We're not gonna hash it again. Everybody good with that?
It's not gonna be done, but that's okay.
No, if it's 80%,
Well,
that's good.
yeah.
We built a lot of things to be built at 80%.
So your next meeting is April 12th.
Yep,
And so first agenda item will be the matrix again to finalize
that
that.
sounds good.
Any ideas on a second agenda item, or?
I don't know.
I can put-
I would advocate for us starting to look at the GIS layers at the same time because
okay.
we've got the majority of the criteria. I think there's only so many. I think we can narrow it down enough.
Okay, I mean, I can,
Are
either
there-
Corey can, if somebody like, I just keep picking on Corey because I know him, but,
Because, yeah,
and he's talented
He's
as
good.
heck. But yeah, or you can do that. I mean, one of us needs to probably put together a good sample of what, like the Florida Forever assessment data. That's probably one of the first places I would start.
Yeah,
Clip.
just to let you know, I mean,
Clip.
depending on what you're requesting, I could easily get online and go to FNA right now and get the clip for our county and whatever data you want on the fly, able to pull it up.
Well, yeah.
So let's plan on that next
Okay,
time.
how about this? I will get with Ryan.
Okay,
And Elizabeth wants to join in,
Okay.
we can. And we will make sure he has the stuff loaded so we can take
Okay.
some time and look at it live.
and maybe the three of you could give a joint presentation and show the rest of us what we're talking about with these data layers.
Is that good?
Yeah, I think, just from the standpoint of sunshine laws, right, we gotta be
Yeah,
careful.
don't
as
violate
far
the
as,
sunshine law, you guys.
You know,
I
getting
don't,
together.
that's not a,
it's not a decision-making.
yeah, we're fine.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking at the attorney, there's not a problem, right?
She's your attorney?
Yeah, you're
No.
gonna see, you guys.
I wish I had an attorney that good.
Channel 47 tonight.
Is there any other suggestions on agenda items for next meeting?
Do we need to specifically name, like, the form submittal option and the ability to do so and what all gets included in that? I don't know if that's,
That could
if we
be
need to look at the form itself or just adopt one from another county, but, I mean,
I like
just in
that.
the interest of actually
Get it moved.
acquiring properties to evaluate.
Well, I think, we had homework this time, and I think homework next time is to look at some of the other counties that have been mentioned and what they're doing.
And see what you like.
And
See what you like about those forms, and could you send us Sarasota and Nassau County forms? And we could flesh those out and see what we like and maybe what wouldn't be appropriate for us here.
God,
or what we-
I wish I could remember those other ones that are super active.
It'll come to you. You got a couple weeks. Yeah, it'll come to you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thought
so
from this brain could die of loneliness, all right?
the
We
form,
knock it all out.
form categories that we're talking, that could be a subcategory of, under the matrix, the first.
Okay, sure, whatever you want. If we only have 2 agenda items, they're gonna be detailed enough, well, it'll be an hour on each one.
Yeah, oh yeah, okay.
We don't have to have 10 items on the agenda.
Or if we finish in an hour and a half.
That's okay too.
Everybody's probably.
Well, that's my motto.
Yeah.
I have one other public comment.
Oh,
3 minutes.
for the next meeting, could we please have it in the BCC auditorium and have it televised on GTV? Could we please have the email addresses and telephone numbers of each of every single one of the board members? And it needs to be open to the public to watch on TV. And we really need to have the clerk do the minutes and make sure the minutes are accurate.
Okay, we've captured that on the tape.
Thanks.
Okay, is there any other further business that we need to discuss this afternoon?
Was there staff?
I do have a couple of staff items.
Oh, okay.
One, the final, there was a couple of Senate Bill 882 and House Bill 761. It talks to specifically the district plan, water management district, and that talks to prioritization of existing wetland systems, critical wetlands, for acquisition through the district. And so that's sort of, you can read through that if you'd like. Again, it just falls in line with what your focus and tasks are here.
Yeah.
That kind of falls in line with our hydrologic category as well. But just wanted to show you that that's on the street right
Okay.
now.
I just had a thought bringing up Water Management District, and I think there might be a couple of us that worked for Water Management District at one time or another, to include Wayne Flowers. Would it make sense to get one of their people over here and give us a presentation on how we might be able to interact with each other?
I would say yes if that passes, because they're going to be scrambling pretty quickly to update their 5-year plan, because they actually have to come up with an annual plan. When I read that, you probably read it too as
It's
well.
gonna pass.
Yeah.
It's gonna pass.
If it pass, okay. Shorty says it's going to pass. So therefore, yeah, they're going to have to redo their. So when they redo it, I think
That would
that's.
be the appropriate time.
Is Jeff in here? Jeff? is their legislative liaison.
He retired, Jeff Sample.
Really? Dang.
I don't know if they've replaced her or not, but no, I would actually bring in the land acquisition Sheila Theus. Because she's
Okay,
the one
well,
who had to.
I guess it doesn't have to happen in our next meeting,
Right.
the way it sounds.
But the meeting after that.
But keep that in mind, that if that does get pulled, if that does get approved, then I think that would be a good information
Man,
presentation for us,
Okay.
whoever that would be.
And the legislature is going to want to see results, so the district's going to be motivated to buy,
Okay.
which is wonderful. But
And finally, just this morning, we got something from our real estate department about inquiring about the county purchasing their property, an existing property, which is in your neck of the woods, Mr. Adams.
yeah, right across the street.
Right adjacent to the existing McCullough Creek property that the county owns out on County Road 13 South, just north of 207. It says they have a developer interested and wanted to check with the county first. The area in red on the map, which I could provide to the public as well, if so desired. It's not for sale, but it'd be approximately 8 acres or 17 acres. There's 2 areas there. Didn't give us a price, but explained that we are appraisal driven. Let's see, in addition to that, there is 600 acres across from McCullough Creek. I'm kind of getting off topic here, but, and, you know, we purchased McCullough Creek through Jacksport, who owned it. And they purchased that for their mitigation for the harbor deepening project.
Right.
And they recorded a core easement over McCullough Creek itself, which bisects our property, as well as 600 acres on the other side, or I guess you could say south side, riverside of
Adjacent to Mike's property.
County Road 13, adjacent, yes, to Mike's property. And so there's a potential there that the county could accept a donation from Jacksport for that. And it's an existing conservation easement, but it's just something that I wanted to throw out there, just because this property is right next door to it.
Is this something that, I mean, we really don't have any traction right now for anything. I mean, you don't
No.
need anything from us right now.
Nothing,
It's just FYI.
Just FYI,
Yeah, okay.
and this, something that, you know, could come in as an example to say, you know, using the nomination form, you know, something like this. would
Maybe our
come in.
first project.
Could be.
It would score, I mean, I'm real familiar with that.
Yeah.
For lots of reasons. It would score pretty high, I can assure you, because it's adjacent to conservation areas, it's right, you know,
Yeah,
Yeah,
adjacent to the river.
Apparently the land south of that's conservation.
yeah. So again, that just came in just hot off the presses this morning, so I just wanted to
Okay.
give that to you.
Here's some big timber, and I don't mean that from a cutting standpoint. That area to the east of your property has some monster, gigantic pine trees in it.
Ryan, was there anything else from the staff report side?
That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
anybody else at the board here have any closing
Like pine trees
comments?
you don't see very often.
Just
do
a
I-
thank you to Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, he's doing a great job. Yep, pressure's on.
Thank
He's
you.
gonna go outside and put on another hat now when he leaves here.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Catch up
Do
on
I have a
emails.
motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I need a second. Any discussion that we don't want to adjourn? Okay, very good, thanks y'all. Thank